October 12th, 1974, 11:47 p.m. The Troubadour backstage. The glass left Joni Mitchell's hand with enough force to shatter against a wall. But it didn't hit the wall. It hit Bob Dylan. Whiskey and ice exploded across his chest, soaking his denim jacket, amber liquid dripping onto the floor. He didn't flinch. Just stood there, dripping, his expression unreadable. Behind them, two roadies froze. A folk singer dropped his guitar pick. Everyone understood they were witnessing something that would echo through decades. Joni's hand was still extended, the empty glass trembling in her grip. Her blonde hair hung in her face, her floral dress wrinkled from 2 hours on stage. "You're a plagiarist," she'd said 30 seconds earlier, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A fake." Dylan had responded with 3 words. Just 3. And those words made Joni Mitchell throw a drink at the most untouchable man in folk music. But what brought them to this moment started 7 years earlier, 1967. Joni Mitchell was sleeping on couches in Greenwich Village, performing for tips in coffee houses. Bob Dylan was already a god. Albums analyzed like scripture. Every word he spoke recorded by fans. When he entered a room, conversation stopped. Joni met him at a party. She was performing Michael from Mountains. Dylan walked in, listened without expression, left without speaking to her. Later, Bob liked it. That was her approval. Second hand, like a king acknowledging a peasant. By 1968, Joni had released her first album. Critics immediately called her the female Bob Dylan. She hated that phrase with everything in her. "I'm not the female anything," she told journalists. "I'm Joni Mitchell." But the comparisons continued. The folk scene couldn't conceive of a woman succeeding independently. She had to be understood through a man. By 1971, she'd released Blue, an album so raw and sophisticated it redefined songwriting. Dylan reportedly listened once and said, "Too personal." 2 words that revealed everything about their difference. Dylan believed in mystery, distance, control. Joni believed in truth, vulnerability, honesty, and Dylan never corrected the comparisons, never said she was her own artist. He just let it happen. Folk music in the early 1970s had a secret everyone knew, but nobody mentioned. Women could be muses, backup singers, subjects of songs written by men. But they weren't supposed to be the visionaries. Joni wrote Both Sides Now at 24. Frank Sinatra recorded it. Judy Collins made it a hit. The craft was undeniable. Dylan heard it. People who were there said he claimed, "She got that from me," not acknowledging her talent, claiming ownership. Joni heard about it third hand, said nothing publicly, but friends noticed she stopped mentioning Dylan, stopped attending parties where he might appear. By 1974, she was at her peak. Court and Spark was selling out venues. Critics took her seriously as a complete artist, composer, arranger, singer. Dylan's recent albums were getting mixed reviews. The myth was still powerful, but cracks showed. They ran in the same circles. Laurel Canyon, the Troubadour, folk clubs where artists gathered and competed, and Joni had noticed something over the years. Melodies, chord progressions, lyrical phrases, things too similar to be coincidence. She couldn't prove anything, but she'd been keeping track. That October night, she decided she was done staying silent. Joni finished her second set at 11:30. Her voice was raw from 2 hours of performance, pouring emotion into every song. The applause was still ringing in her ears as she walked backstage. The green room at the Troubadour was small and dim, lit by a single lamp that cast amber shadows across the worn couch and scratched coffee table. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like fog. Beer bottles and half-empty glasses crowded the table. Her guitarist, Larry Carlton, was tuning his instrument. 2 roadies were talking quietly near the door. David Blue sat in the corner, rolling a cigarette. It felt safe, familiar, a place to decompress after the intensity of performing. Then the stage manager appeared in the doorway. His expression was uncertain. "Joni, Dylan's here. He was in the audience for your second set. He's asking if he can come back and say hello." The room went quiet. Larry's hand stopped on the guitar strings. The roadie's conversation died mid-sentence. Joni felt something tighten in her chest. She'd known Dylan might be in LA. The folk scene wasn't that big, but she hadn't seen him in the crowd, hadn't felt his presence during the show. "You okay?" Larry asked, watching her face. "Fine," she said. Her voice was steady. "Tell him to come back." But her hands were already gripping the armrest of the couch, already preparing for something she couldn't quite name. 5 minutes felt like an hour. She could hear footsteps in the hallway. Voices. Someone laughing at something Dylan said. Always the voices around him, people eager to be near the king, to catch some of his reflected light. Then he was standing in the doorway. Same denim jacket he'd worn for years. Same wild curly hair. Same way of entering a room without really entering it. Physically present, but emotionally distant. Like he was watching everything from behind glass. He didn't look at Joni first. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the roadies, the guitarists, the bottles on the table, making everyone wait for his attention. Finally, his gaze landed on her. "Good show," he said. Not to her, to the room, to everyone and no one. The words hung there. Good show. Not great. Not incredible. Good. The kind of thing you'd say to a competent musician who'd done their job adequately. Joni felt anger spark in her chest, but she kept her voice cool. "Thank you. Did you enjoy the new arrangements?" "They were interesting." That word. Interesting. Not beautiful. Not innovative. Not brave. Interesting. The word you use when you want to damn with faint praise. When you want someone to know you noticed them, but weren't particularly impressed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Larry was watching both of them carefully. The roadies had stopped pretending to have their own conversation. Dylan walked over to the couch and sat down, completely at ease, like he owned the space. Someone, one of the roadies eager to please, handed him a beer. He accepted it without acknowledging the gesture, pulled out a pack of cigarettes, lit one. The smoke curled up toward the water-stained ceiling. Joni remained standing. She wouldn't sit while he was sitting, wouldn't give him the higher position, even symbolically. "I've been listening to your new album," Dylan said. He took a long pull from the beer. "Court and Spark, you're getting a lot of airplay." "It's doing well," Joni replied, still careful, still controlled. "There's a song." He paused, drawing out the moment. "Help Me." The melody reminded me of something. Joni's pulse quickened. She knew what was coming, had known it would come eventually. "What did it remind you of?" Her voice was steady. Too steady. Dylan smiled, that infuriating, knowing smile. "Something I wrote a few years back. Can't remember which song exactly." The room went completely silent. Everyone there understood what he was saying. Not that he'd influenced her. That would have been normal, expected. He was claiming she'd copied him, taken something that belonged to him, and he was doing it in that careful, deniable way that gave him cover if challenged. This was it. The moment Joni had been preparing for, without knowing she was preparing for it. Joni stood up, looked directly at Dylan. "You can't remember which song because it doesn't exist. You're uncomfortable that I'm succeeding without copying you." Dylan took a long pull from his beer. "I didn't say you were copying. You implied it. You're too smart for direct accusations. You plant seeds and let others do the work of tearing someone down." People exchanged glances. This wasn't normal folk scene discourse. "I think you're being sensitive," Dylan said. "Sensitive? That's what men say when women call them out. It's easier than addressing the problem." "What problem?" "That you've been stealing from me for years. Melodies, approaches, ideas. And because you're Bob Dylan, nobody questions it." Dylan's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation." "Yes, it is. You're a plagiarist and a fake. You've been getting away with it because everyone's too afraid to challenge you." Larry Carlton touched Joni's arm. "Maybe." She pulled away. "No, this needs saying. I'm tired of him taking credit for other people's innovations. I'm tired of him implying anything good in my work must come from studying his." Dylan finally showed emotion, a slight tightening around his eyes. "You're calling me a plagiarist?" "Yes." Dylan set down his beer, looked at her, and said 3 words. Dylan set down his beer on the coffee table. He looked directly at Joni Mitchell, and he said 3 words. "Prove it, then." Not angry, not defensive, calm, almost bored. Those three words contained everything she hated about him. The arrogance, the certainty that he was untouchable, the knowledge that even if she could prove it, which they both knew she couldn't, the establishment would protect their king. Prove it, Joni repeated, her voice shaking with rage. You know I can't. That's why you do it the way you do it. She took a step toward him. The roadies pressed against the wall. You're smart enough to steal in ways that can't be documented. A melody altered slightly. A lyrical idea rephrased. Just different enough that I can't prove it. But the same enough that you know and I know. Sounds like inspiration, Dylan said calmly. That's how art works. We all borrow. There's borrowing and there's theft. And you know the difference. Dylan stood up, deliberately, showing he was choosing to end this. I think we're done here. Of course you do. When things get uncomfortable, you leave. You walk away and let other people deal with the mess. He turned toward the door. Joni saw the glass on the table, the whiskey, half full, condensation running down the sides. Her hand moved before her brain caught up, before she could think about consequences. Dylan. He turned back, and Joni Mitchell threw the drink. The amber liquid arced through the smoky air. Ice cubes tumbling, Dylan's expression changing from dismissal to surprise. The whiskey hit his chest with a loud splash. The liquid soaked his jacket instantly. Ice cubes bounced off him, scattering across the floor. Everyone froze. Dylan stood there dripping, whiskey running down his jacket, ice cubes at his feet. He didn't move, didn't wipe at the liquid, didn't react. The silence was absolute. Joni stood with her arm extended, empty glass in hand, breathing hard, heart pounding. But she felt something else too. Relief. The satisfaction of finally doing something instead of just taking it. Then Dylan did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not cruel, not mocking. Something else. Something that might have been respect. You've got guts, Mitchell, he said quietly. I'll give you that. Then he turned and walked out. The door closed with a soft click. Joni dropped the glass onto the couch, sat down heavily, put her face in her hands. You okay? Larry asked. I just threw a drink at Bob Dylan. He deserved it. That doesn't matter. By tomorrow, everyone will know. And they won't remember what he said. They'll remember what I did. David Blue finally spoke from across the room. Jesus Christ, Joni. She looked up. He's been stealing for years. Someone needed to say it. But did you need to throw a drink? Yes. Her voice was firm now. Yes, I did, because that's the only way men like him pay attention. When you do something they can't ignore. The roadies were already leaving, eager to spread the story. By midnight, phones would be ringing across Los Angeles, and Joni Mitchell's life was about to get very complicated. By dawn, every musician in L.A. knew. Not the plagiarism accusation, not Dylan's dismissive response. Just Joni Mitchell threw a drink at Bob Dylan. The story spread like wildfire. Phones rang constantly. Some said she was jealous. Some said unstable. Some said drunk. Very few asked why. Rolling Stone called for comment. Dylan's people, no comment. Joni's people, no comment. But opinions flooded in. Male musicians mostly defended Dylan. Joni's too emotional. Women always get insecure around male success. Female musicians were quieter. But in dressing rooms and studios, they started sharing stories. Times when male musicians took credit for their ideas. Times when they'd been called difficult for standing up. Joni said nothing publicly for 3 months. Then in February 1975, a Melody Maker interview. I said what needed to be said. I don't regret it. Do you still believe Dylan plagiarized? I believe the folk scene has a problem giving credit where it's due, especially to women. Dylan never responded directly, but friends noticed his public comments about other artists became more generous. He acknowledged influences more explicitly. Whether Joni changed him or he simply matured, nobody knew. 40 years later, the story is remembered differently. In 2010, Joni told the LA Times, "He's not authentic. He's a plagiarist." The quote went viral, but women in music weren't surprised. They'd watched Joni fight that battle her entire career. Dylan has never addressed it. His memoir mentions her twice, briefly without acknowledging tension. But something changed after 1974. It became harder to dismiss female artists, harder to treat them as derivative of male genius, harder to ignore when credit wasn't given. Not because everyone became enlightened, but because Joni had been willing to throw that drink and accept the consequences, to be called difficult, emotional, jealous. Musicians at the Troubadour still ask, is this where Joni threw the drink? They smile when they ask. Not because it's funny, because it matters, because sometimes the most important moments don't happen on stage. They happen when someone says, enough. Joni Mitchell and Bob Dylan never reconciled. Both brilliant, both influential, both complicated. But only one was brave enough to throw a drink and speak truth to power. That October night proved something. The bravest thing an artist can do isn't creating beautiful music. It's refusing to stay silent when that music is being stolen. The folk scene wanted Joni to be grateful for attention from men like Dylan, to accept secondhand compliments, to never challenge the king. She refused. And in refusing, she showed every artist who came after that you don't need permission to call out injustice. You don't need approval to demand respect. Sometimes you just need the courage to throw a drink. Bob Dylan is still considered one of the greatest songwriters in American history. Joni Mitchell is recognized as one of the most innovative musicians of the 20th century. But on that October night in 1974, in a smoky green room at the Troubadour, the power dynamics shifted. Not permanently, not completely, but enough. Enough for one woman's voice to finally be heard over the men who'd spent years talking over her. Thank you for watching. If you lived through this era or love hearing the real stories behind the music, please subscribe. Share your memories in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.